Welcome back to Dollhouse of Offerings. Last time we learned about why exactly a certain girl is completely mental. She suddenly opened her eyes. It was still the middle of the night. Her throat was dry, her face was burning hot. She felt flustered and restless. Wrong button. She got up and wiped the sweat off her forehead. After heaving a deep sigh, she reached out for the pitcher of water by her pillow and drank straight from it. She collected herself, rested her hand on her chest. Her heart was still pounding. While gazing at the annex where he resided, she slid her hand towards her now moist crotch. Man, we are 54 seconds in, girl.
Kuro-san.
You couldn't make it in for a minute. Kyoko found joy in saying his name. She rolled about her futon, caressing her nether regions. Thank you, game. We finally met, my one and only. Oh, Lord, they're gonna make me start censoring in a minute. How unsightly. What if he saw me like this? Would he lust after me, I wonder? Would he devote himself even more to me? Kyoko grunted as she imagined the spectacle, surrendering herself to the feelings that she'd held for years.
Kuro-san. Suki.
The voice that leaked from her as she masturbated was very mark of a young maiden in love. And 2 minutes in. Oh, she is crazy. The sun shone brightly in the sky without a cloud in sight. The weather couldn't be more perfect. Kyaru closed his hands loosely as he stood in front of the entrance of the Shiki Manor. Uramichi blurted out his thoughts, his mind seemingly distracted.
頼道様も京子につけばよかったのでは?
Presently, Kyoko was with Dugan and Yukiko. They were on their way from the shrine in the Ichikura family's premises to the Shiki estate. They should have been riding in a carriage, somewhat resembling a procession, sharing in their happiness with the other villagers. The bride was to visit the shrine, and those with her would receive a gift from the Ichikura to commemorate their union. After that, they were to proceed to the house where the groom awaited. The ceremony was performed by placing the gift, usually a decorative box, in front of the couple. That was the customary wedding ceremony for the 7 noble houses in Nanawawa village.
もう父上と母上がいるのだ。家を留守にして、婿だけ一人にしたら笑い物になる。
ごもっともです。
気を使わせたか？
いえ。
そうか。
Uramichi nodded slightly and smirked.
だいぶ柔らかくはなったが、まだ君の本心からの行動と相手のそれが分かりにくいな。
俺も慣れていません。
お？
Half a month had passed since he and Kyoko had exchanged a kiss. The busy days went by in a flash. The community began seeing them in a different, more positive way, and they grew used to watching them as well. However,
他人をおもんぱかっての行動など、生まれてからこの方、携わったことがなかったものですから。
やさかの、それも傑作であればそうだろうな。
Kaoru shook his head in denial.
八坂としてはそうかもしれませんが、先生は人らしくすることができないと言っていました。
伊予殿のおっしゃられることもわからんでもないが、そんなものは誰しもそうだろう。
Uramichi sank deep into thought and mumbled.
聖人君子になれるわけではない。誰しもが論語に倣って生きられるものでもない。おそらく伊予殿は君の体が眩しくて内実に対する要求も高いのだろうが、我々はそうではない。
Observing Uramichi, Kaoru pointed out what Uramichi was getting at.
こうなすことですか。
結局のところそこに尽きる。私にはその才能というのか運というのか、とにかく悪く至らなかった。父上に対しても顔向けできなかったが、九郎君が京子に跡取り息子を産ませられれば私も報われる。
Uramichi cast his gaze down as if lamenting something. Kaoru nodded in response. Finally, he realized he was thinking of his wife, of Kyoko's mother. A woman who didn't birth children had no value. A woman who didn't birth an heir had no meaning. That was common knowledge within the Shiki family and in turn the 7 noble houses. Kaoru knew nothing of Uramichi's wife, Kyoko's mother. But for Uramichi, it would not have been a good feeling as to see Kyoko being treated like garbage in the same way she had been. They couldn't comfort her either. In every sense of the word, she was treated like a non-person among the Shiki family. Dugan, Yukiko, Uramichi, even Kyoko herself never talked about her. Kaoru was not allowed to even hear or know about a person like that.
京子なら丈夫な子供を産みますよ。
Hence, that was all he could say.
はらませると宣言される親の気持ちだな。
Uramichi smiled in relief, if only faintly. They should be arriving soon. While waiting for Kyoko's arrival, Kaoru deepened his bonds with his father-in-law. He considered it another duty of the groom.
失礼します。祝いの品を届けに参りました。この度は誠におめでとうございます。
ありがとう。中の者の指示に従ってくれ。
Kaoru nodded relaxedly. A group of men with 5 packages entered the manor. Several gifts from the noble houses were already sitting inside the tatami rooms. While the Shiki normally did not employ anyone at their households, there definitely weren't enough hands to go around all today. The villagers within House Shiki's land more than happily volunteered to help.
九郎様、この度はおめでとうございます。
Another villager came to wish him well. Though the ceremony was only to be held among close relatives, they came to greet him during the gaps of time.
ありがとう。忙しいところわざわざすまないな。
そんなことはありませんよ。お嬢様がお幸せになるんだ。私らにとってもいいことです。
答えられるよう努力する。
いや、そんなかしこまらないでください。みんな九郎様なら大丈夫だと思ってますよ。
そうか？
ええ、実直なお人柄で伊達男だと皆申しております。これで式家も安泰だと。
素直に受け取っておこう。
本心ですよ。ではお邪魔してもいけませんし、失礼いたします。
The villager politely bowed and left. After meeting up with his family outside the gate, he turned around and bowed once more. Kaoru returned his bow and his wife and children smiled back. He couldn't comprehend whether he was even worth that level of courtesy.
九郎君は調子に乗るような性格ではないな。
そうですね。今のところはああ思われていると、それだけです。
That was the reality of it, nothing more. Even though Kyaru had begun to understand the intentions of others, that didn't change his own view on things.
父上のような腹芸はできないとも思われているが、まあそれはおいおい覚えられるだろう。
気を使っていただきありがとうございます。
九郎君は大事な婿殿だからな。気遣いの一つもしてみせるとも。
Uramichi curled his mouth into a weary smile. Kyaru's future father-in-law tended to laugh like that often. His smile seemed tired but relieved. It wasn't a bad smile. The fact that he was showing this side of himself was a sign of his trust in Kyaru. No abnormalities inside or around the manor. Within the range that he could detect, he couldn't sense anyone hiding or with intent or hostility. He was able to sense the villagers who were helping out, but it was easier to go in and out than usual. Dugan and Io were probably fine, but there wasn't any guarantee that any of the other houses wouldn't try to pull something. There doesn't seem to be anything suspicious with House Sagusa's security. Sagusa's family subordinates were guarding the Shiki estate, surrounding it intermittently. Their head, Range, and her daughters were nowhere to be found. They had already settled the issue with Rinka, so they probably didn't feel the need to do any more. The Sagusa and Futara were the enemy to the Shiki. They did change their perception. But the Sagusa family was openly hostile to those with a male line of succession. But it wasn't that they were specifically targeting the Shiki family. What happened? Hold on. What? Hold on a minute, what happened? Hold on. There we go. I had to go backwards. So apparently I found the fast forward button. While the Futara were the cause of concern, they'd always been that way, so there was nothing else that could be done. So effectively, the test has just shown that the Sagusa have gotten more dangerous, status quo for everyone else. Kaoru wondered what would happen by the time that the succession went to Yorimichi, and then to himself. There was no use thinking about it now, but he was aware of the danger. Still, there weren't any problems for now. If I keep on obsessing over this, I'll only worry Kyoko. Kaoru loosened up his expression without realizing it and imagined Kyoko in her bridal dress. I mustn't. He made a conscious effort to calm the ripples in his heart. The way he was now, he would only be laughed at again, but even that was something he could think of positively.
来たか。
Kyaru's ears perked up at the sound of hooves clopping and the carriage approaching while everyone else around him scrambled about. He didn't budge an inch. Even if he did move about, there wasn't much he could do. To the casual observer, he appeared to be a solid, reliable man. Kyaru closed his eyes, trying to envision how Kyoko looked. I can't imagine it at all. Nothing came to mind. Perhaps his imagination was lacking, or maybe he was more anxious than usual. At some point, the sound of the carriage stopped. He could hear 1, 2, then 3 sets of footprints slowly approaching. There was no mistaking those were the who was the bride's.
クロさん
He opened his eyes upon hearing her voice. Her figure entered his vision.
座敷は用意してある。行くぞ。
Without a hesitation or emotion, Kyaru took Kyoko's hand and hastily led her into the room. Dugan was at a loss for words as he held a box that contained a wedding gift. Kyaru paid him no heed and rushed on in.
クロウさん
Kyaru's steps were speedy. Kyoko stumbled a step or two in his haste. He slowed his pace down a little, but he was still quite fast.
何か
Kyoko's hand was cold. It was a hand he was well familiar with. Sweat ran from it. She was likely anxious. Kyaru felt apologetic as he pulled her into the tatami room. The room was ready, but there was no one there. Kyaru had let go of Kyoko's hand and took a few steps forward before he turned around to face her. That is pretty.
おかしいならそうおっしゃってください。すぐに直しますから。ですから
Look at that. That is such beautiful art. Kyoko cast her head down, hiding her expression, but her tone was somber. She joined her white hands together, clenching them tighter. Kyaru looked at her apologetically.
あそこは人が多すぎた。手を握って少し落ち着いたが。我慢できそうになかったんだ。
それ
京子があまりにも綺麗だったからな。
As if returning to her senses, Kyoko lifted her head. Again, really nice art. Seeing Kyoko in her white kimono, Kyaru wanted to give in to his impulses. He held those desires back and spoke.
式の直前に抱きしめるわけにもいかないだろう。
そうですね。それはいささか大胆すぎます。もうよかった。
I love the facial expressions.
俺がもっと慎み深いならよかったんだろうが、なかなかうまくいかないな。
私の方こそクロウさんの前ではそんなものと縁がないです。今もずっと興奮していますし。
Her intertwined fingers twitched vexingly. Her cheeks stained red.
私でクロウさんがそんなになっていただける。それだけで幸せでたまらなくなってしまいます。
Kyaru approached Kyoko and slowly extended his hand to her.
誰も来ないな。
気を使ってくれているのでしょう。ですからまだ時間はありますよ。
そうだな。
With a smile on her face, Kyoko accepted Kyaru's hand. Because Kyaru had been initiating contact more often lately, she didn't hesitate. She felt his large fingers running across her porcelain white skin, tracing around her cold hands, her neck, her cheeks. His fingertips touched her lips, twisting their shape. It's getting weird. The sigh that escaped her lips was hot and wet. He continued to touch Kyoko as if tasting her.
くすぐったいです。
すまん。
He lost track of time, seeing her expression change and bend as he continued to caress her.
いいえ、好きですから。
Kyaru nodded at Kyoko's entranced expression. The mood was gentle. It all felt so normal that it was hard to believe they would become husband and wife today. However, there was no need to hold back, and they had always done before, like they had always done before.
式が終わったらすぐに二人きりになりましょう。
わかった。
はしたないと思われるかもしれませんが、もう我慢したくなくて。ですから。
わかってる。
本当にわかっていますか？
Even as Kyoko's cheeks burned hot from the embarrassment, she puffed her lips out in a pout.
それも俺の役目だからな。昼間からというのもどうかと思うが。
言わないでください。こんなになるとは思わなくて。今だってもうあんな触り方をするからいっぱいいっぱいで。
Her hot, sweet breath brought a smile to Kiaru's face.
そうだな。初めてでうまくできるかわからないが、マグワを。
It's building up to such a sweet moment. I don't trust this game.
私ももちろん初めてですが、ずっとクロウさんでほぐしてきましたから、いっぱいしてしっかり絡ませてくださいね。
わかった。
楽しみです。
She is just a cat in heat. Just as they got to that point in the conversation, Dugan's footsteps approached. Kiaru stepped back from Kyoko, and they sat down in a formal position and awaited him.
クロー殿、話は済んだか？
There wasn't a trace of anger in Dugan's expression. In fact, he seemed pleased.
はい。突然の勝手、申し訳ありません。
構わぬよ。京子もいつ着くのかとずっとそわそわしていたのでな。
おじいさま、そうですが、さすがに不意をつかれました。
Dugan laughed as Kyoko's face turned red in embarrassment.
なかなかの見せ物であった。そろそろ他の者たちも来るだろうが、式が終わるまでは我慢するのだぞ。
わかっています。ですが、終わってからはきっとできませんので、そうお願いしていたところです。
結構結構。まあ大行なものでもなし、好きにすればよかろう。
Other sets of footprints approached. It was Yorimichi as well as Yukiko.
クロウ君、京子は落ち着いたか？
京子ちゃん、いくら嬉しいからって暴れたらダメよ。
大丈夫です。二人とも私ばかり迷惑をかけていると思っていますね。
Never the man's fault.
そうではないのか？
あら、まさか。
そのまさかです。クロウさんの方が我慢できなかったのですよ。
Yorimichi looked at Kyoko doubtful, while Yukiko brought her hand to her mouth and smiled.
そうは見えなかったが、そうなのか？
申し訳ありません。
クロウさん、この子をかばわなくてもいいのよ。
They're just teasing her at this point.
いえ、事実です。京子があまりにも綺麗だったので。
京子、気をしっかり持たんか。寄り道、他の者たちは。
Dugan was referring to the other big names from Nanawa village. They had come voluntarily to visit the Shiki family and celebrate. Of course, the Shiki had been informed in advance, though they did not demand any of them come. Out of goodwill, huh? Kyaru felt everything that the Shiki, in particular Dugan, had built up until this point. He straightened his posture and listened intently. Glancing at Kyoko, he saw that she, too, had a stern expression.
隣の間に控えさせています。宴の準備もすでに。
As Dugan sat, Yorimichi and Yukiko followed suit.
式が済み次第、祝い酒を振る舞いたらふく食わせろ。倹約などと考えるなよ。あれらは我が家を慕ってくれているのだ。九郎殿と京子にもそうしてもらえるように尽くさねばならん。
は。
頼道も心得ています。そんな遠慮をしたら、あなたの方が怒ると分かっていますよ。
当たり前だ。格式だのなんだのがんじがらめ。けんけんごうごうとしていてもつまらんだろう。皆で祝い、飲んで騒ぐのが良いのだ。たとえどこかに主役が消えていても、それはそれで構わんからな。
ご配慮いただき、ありがとうございます。
京子、励めよ。
Kyoko's voice was restrained, likely because she was embarrassed, but her flushed cheeks showed that it was just what she was hoping for.
では、始めるか。
He looked at everyone in the face, or he looked at everyone's faces in the room and adjusted his posture. Kyaru and Kyoko followed suit. So next time we're gonna do the wedding. I know it's kind of short, but hey, we'll find out what happens next time. Thanks for joining me.